Have you ever wondered if it is still possible to walk the same ground where Jesus faced his deepest agony? Imagine a silent place surrounded by ancient olive trees, where the Son of God, overcome by anguish, sweat drops of blood. What if I told you that this sacred place, known as Gethsemane, not only exists to this day, but also holds secrets that few have dared to reveal? Stay with me until the end, because what you discover now could forever change the way you see this powerful story. Amid the holy hills of Jerusalem, there is a garden that many believe to be the same Gethsemane mentioned in the Gospels. A place charged with emotion, where the weight of humanity's destiny was felt so intensely that even nature seems to have bowed before the Savior's suffering. But did the ancient olive trees that still grow there really witness that indescribable moment? Or is there an even bigger secret hidden beneath modern buildings, waiting to be revealed? This isn't just time travel. It is a spiritual, archaeological, and historical journey in search of evidence that connects faith and science in one of the most dramatic episodes in the entire Bible. Gethsemane is not just a place, it is a symbol of absolute surrender, of the internal struggle between fear and obedience, between humanity and divinity. And believe me, understanding more about this sacred ground will make you look at your own faith in a whole new way. Have you ever had the feeling of being faced with something immensely bigger than yourself, feeling that there are mysteries that time has not been able to erase? This is the feeling that surrounds Gethsemane to this day. Every stone, every ancient root, every breath of wind between the trees carries echoes of that night when Jesus, in deep prayer, prepared himself for the supreme sacrifice. And while many are content with just visiting the tourist garden, few know that there are studies, historical records, and even recent discoveries that may indicate that the real Gethsemane may be hidden elsewhere. More authentic, more mysterious, and perhaps even more sacred. Get ready, because what comes next will take you far beyond what you imagined about Gethsemane. It is impressive to imagine that, even after 2,000 years, Gethsemane continues to pulse in the hearts of those who seek to understand the deepest mystery of the Christian faith. Every detail of that garden seems to whisper a story, not just of pain, but of hope, of courage in the face of the impossible. And when we think that perhaps there is an even more hidden Gethsemane, preserved in secret through the layers of time, our curiosity awakens even stronger, like a silent call to discovery. If, at any point so far, this topic has touched your heart or made you reflect in some way on your own spiritual journey, I want to invite you to share your opinion in the comments. What does Gethsemane represent to you? Do you believe that sacred ground still holds secrets waiting to be revealed? Writing below is not just a way of recording your vision. It is also a way of building a community where people like you, passionate about the Bible, history, and the mysteries of faith, can meet and become stronger. And if this type of journey makes sense to you, if it inspires you to seek answers and delve into forgotten stories that echo through the centuries, then leave a like on this video. It seems small, I know, but each like helps this message reach further, touching other hearts that may also be thirsty for this type of discovery. Oh, and of course, if you're not already part of our community, subscribe to the channel right now. In addition to not missing the next episodes of this series about lost places in the Bible, you also directly support the growth of this work, allowing us to continue bringing to light mysteries that often remain hidden from the eyes of the world. Your participation here is what keeps this journey alive. Together we can walk ancient trails and unearth secrets that still echo through time. There is a silent force that drives us to seek deep roots, places where history meets eternity, and where every stone, every fragment of the soil seems to contain forgotten memories. Gethsemane is, for many, more than a physical space. It's a reflection of our own inner journey, a living reminder that, at crucial moments, every decision has an eternal impact. And it is precisely this connection, so human and so divine at the same time, that makes walking through these ancient places awaken something within us that words can hardly express. When Jesus entered Gethsemane, he carried with him the weight of humanity. It wasn't just a man walking towards his destiny, it was the pure representation of the internal battle between fear and the mission, between pain and surrender. And have you ever stopped to think how many times we also find ourselves in our own Gethsemanes? Moments when our silent decisions shape the course of our lives, without anyone seeing. Gethsemane is not just a lost garden in Jerusalem. He is the mirror of the transformation that we are all invited to experience. As we explore the behind-the-scenes of this story, we realize that Gethsemane holds much more than olive trees and ancient remains. He holds a hidden truth about humanity, that even the strongest of men can feel fear, and that courage is not the absence of fear, but the decision to move forward despite it. This mentality of perseverance and faith is what spans centuries and still challenges us today. And it is exactly this emotional, deep, and almost invisible dimension that makes Gethsemane one of the most impactful places in the spiritual history of humanity. Now, I want to go even deeper into this subject. There are fascinating accounts that, in Jesus' time, Gethsemane was much larger than the small garden we see today. Many historians believe that the entire region around the Mount of Olives was considered an olive pressing area. And this information changes everything. The name Gethsemane comes from Aramaic "I am a shemen," which means olive oil press. In other words, symbolically, Jesus was in a place of crushing, of extreme pressure, a space of decision where the spirit is tested to the limit, just as olives are crushed to release their purest oil. This revelation drastically changes our perception. Gethsemane was not just a beautiful place of prayer, it was an inner battle scenario. And perhaps that's why so many people feel deeply touched when learning more about this garden. Because to some extent, we've all been through moments where we've been pressured, tested, and had to choose between running away or standing firm. The emotional impact of this understanding is so powerful that it completely transforms our relationship with this biblical passage. Another fascinating aspect is that some modern scholars, analyzing geographic features and ancient texts, suggest that the original Gethsemane may be located somewhat away from the current tourist area. Historical accounts indicate hidden caves, used by farmers and pilgrims at the time, which could have served as shelter for Jesus and his disciples on that dark night. Imagine discovering that there are invisible behind the scenes in that story that we know so well. It's as if part of the truth was still veiled, waiting to be revealed to those who seek it with an open heart. And it's not just about locating a point on the map. It's about understanding the spiritual atmosphere of that moment, about connecting with the reality of what happened there. Because it doesn't matter exactly where you are on the Mount of Olives today. True transformation happens when you understand that Gethsemane is a state of mind, an internal journey of acceptance, courage, and faith. The interesting thing is that this understanding makes us rethink our own trajectory. How many times has life taken us to places of pressure where we have been challenged to make difficult decisions? How many times have we been faced with what seemed like the end, but was actually the beginning of something much bigger? Gethsemane teaches that suffering is not the end point. It is just the transition to something that surpasses human understanding. And when we talk about archaeological mysteries, it's impossible to ignore recent discoveries that suggest that ancient olive presses, caves, and hidden paths may be connected to the true setting of that biblical episode. Each fragment that archaeology reveals is like a piece of a spiritual puzzle that continues to surprise us. There are records showing that 4th century pilgrims already pointed to other nearby locations as possible true Gethsemane, which brings us to a provocative question. Is the real Gethsemane right where everyone thinks it is? Or is it hidden, waiting to be rediscovered by those who dare to look beyond the obvious? When we think about this possibility, our view of faith changes. It stops being just tradition and becomes a lively search for the hidden truth behind the stories, a dive into something that transcends what the eyes can see. And in the process, we discover that Gethsemane was never just a place. It has always been and always will be an invitation to a journey of inner transformation, to an encounter with our own faith in its purest form. If this reflection touched something inside you, comment below. I'm on this journey too. Gethsemane, a name that echoes like a whisper through the centuries. Over time, millions of people traveled to Jerusalem to see with their own eyes the garden where Jesus experienced his greatest anguish. But an unsettling question hangs in the air like a fog that never completely dissipates. Is the Gethsemane we see today, in fact, the same place that witnessed that decisive moment? Or could it be that, like so many other hidden truths in history, part of this reality still remains, hidden under the weight of time, waiting to be discovered? The first references to Gethsemane appear in the Gospels, described as a garden at the foot of the Mount of Olives, where Jesus used to retreat to pray. An apparently simple place, but which became the scene of an invisible, intense, transformative battle. And yet, when we delve deeper into the behind-the-scenes of this story, we find evidence that the exact location of the agony may not be the tourist garden we know today. There are ancient records, forgotten maps, and reports from medieval pilgrims that suggest the existence of other sacred sites nearby, places that, for reasons not yet fully understood, were hidden by the dust of time and the city's changes over the centuries. Now I want to go even deeper into this subject. There is a fascinating theory among archaeologists and scholars that the original Gethsemane could be a little removed from the traditional area. And this revelation, if proven, would have a gigantic impact not only on religious history, but on the spiritual mindset of millions of people around the world. After all, if the true Garden of Agony is hidden elsewhere, what else could be buried beneath the stones and silent ruins of Jerusalem? Recent excavations in the region have brought to light ancient artifacts, such as fragments of olive presses, cisterns, retaining walls and refuge caves, dating back to the Second Temple period, the same time Jesus lived. And even more intriguing, some of these discoveries were made in discrete locations, off the traditional tourist route. This raises an uncomfortable question. Was the current location chosen more for religious and historical convenience than for actual confirmation of the facts? Understanding this possibility requires a transformation in the way we see history. It requires courage to question what has been presented to us as definitive, and a willingness to accept that perhaps the paths of faith and archaeology are much more complex than we imagine. Amid so many revelations, each new archaeological discovery works like a small piece of a spiritual puzzle that, little by little, reveals the big image hidden between the lines of time. When we look at Gethsemane with this new perspective, it becomes even more powerful, not just as a fixed location on the map, but as a living symbol of the pressure that precedes great change. Just as olive oil is only extracted through extreme pressure, our own journey of transformation goes through moments of pain, of doubt, of difficult decisions. And this analogy is no coincidence. Every stone crushed by time, every ancient root, curled deep beneath the ground, seems to silently scream that great miracles are only born after great trials. Another point that makes everything even more intriguing is the mention of hidden caves used by travelers and pilgrims at the time. Many historians suggest that Jesus and his disciples could have used one of these caves to pray and protect themselves on that fateful night. Some apocryphal texts and historical accounts speak of a cave of agony, a reserved, intimate place where the most intense moments of that night would have taken place, away from prying eyes. If this theory is true, it could mean that the real Gethsemane is a little different than we imagine. Perhaps simpler, darker, closer to the raw and dramatic reality of that divine decision. This possibility invites us to reflect on the impact of narratives constructed over the centuries. How many truths have been shaped, forgotten, or adapted according to the needs of the times? The journey in search of the real Gethsemane is also the journey in search of authenticity, of a deep connection with the facts beyond the versions embellished by tradition. And this is fascinating because it gives us back the sense of genuine search, that flame that drives human beings to go beyond appearances in search of what is essential. As more excavations are done around the Mount of Olives, more questions arise. Discoveries of first-century Jewish graves, fragments of ancient buildings and archaeological records point to a complex network of paths and spaces used in that period. Each new find seems to whisper that the story we know is just the surface of something much bigger, deeper, more challenging. And in the face of all this, the question that echoes is, are we ready to face the truth hidden beneath our feet? Can we accept that faith does not depend on an exact geographic point, but on the spiritual understanding that Gethsemane is in each place where we are called to choose between our will and the greater purpose that God has for us? The real Gethsemane may lie dormant in some forgotten cave, or perhaps it is more alive than ever within everyone who sincerely seeks the truth. The journey is not just physical, it is a crossing of the mind, the soul, the heart. And it is in this constant search, in this desire to break through the surface and touch what is authentic, that we connect deeply with the essence of what it means to have faith amid the pressures of life. Each new clue, each new archaeological piece of evidence, each historical fragment are silent invitations to go beyond what is visible and find answers that not only satisfy intellectual curiosity, but also feed the soul. Comment there. That makes sense to me. If you also feel that the true journey is much greater than what we can see. As we delve into this fascinating story, it becomes impossible to ignore what is happening behind the scenes in modern archaeology. Recently, a series of new analyses on the Garden of Gethsemane have reignited a debate that had lain dormant for centuries. Excavations carried out at strategic points around the Mount of Olives brought to light fragments that, until then, had remained hidden under layers of earth and silence. These discoveries not only shook the physical structure of the place, but also challenged established mindsets about what really happened on that tension-filled and spiritual night. Among the most impressive finds, remains of an ancient olive. Press and traces of a network of underground caves were identified, which could have been used as places of refuge and prayer. This not only confirms that the area was a center of agricultural activity in the time of Jesus, but also raises a new perspective, that the Gethsemane described in the Gospels could be directly associated with these environments of pressure and production, further reinforcing the symbolism of spiritual crushing and transformation. Now I want to go even deeper into this subject. When we take a closer look at these findings, we realize that they have a much greater impact than simply relocating a landmark in Jerusalem. They question narratives that have shaped entire generations of faith and devotion. They open space for new interpretations, new possibilities, and also invite us to reflect on how the hidden truth of events can transform our own personal journey. There's something powerful about looking at these fragments of the past and realizing that they're not just bits of stone and ancient wood. They are silent witnesses of decisive moments. And more than that, they connect us directly to a human drama that remains current, the dilemma between one's own will and the divine calling, between the fear of sacrifice and the courage to follow one's purpose. The implications of these discoveries go far beyond their archaeological value. They make us reflect on how we make decisions today, on how we deal with the invisible pressures that shape our mentality and define the direction of our lives. Physical Gethsemane, with its gnarled trees and deep roots, is a living reflection of our own internal processes of transformation. And if we stop to think honestly, we will see that we still cross our modern Gethsemanes today. Moments of silent anguish, decisions that need to be made in the dark, choices that require more faith than reason. It's as if Jesus' journey that night repeats itself on a small scale within each of us. Each time we are challenged to say yes to something we don't yet fully understand, but feel is the right thing to do. Researchers working on these new excavations point to something even more intriguing: signs that the site, in the time of Jesus, was much larger and more diverse than previously imagined. Ancient trails covered. In vegetation, water collection structures and possible rest areas reinforce the idea that Gethsemane was not just a garden, but a dynamic environment, full of life and movement. And this revelation changes everything, because it makes us see that critical moment with a new depth. Instead of an isolated scene in a quiet corner, what we have is a living portrait of a vibrant space, where the divine and the human intersect intensely in the midst of a common reality, in a place of work and production. And that, in itself, is revolutionary, because it removes the idea of untouchable holiness and brings to us the truth that the greatest spiritual transformation can happen in the simplest scenario, in the midst of everyday life, in small decisions and in the most human gestures. These archaeological revelations push us out of our comfort zone. They ask us to look beyond established traditions and open ourselves to the possibility that true faith has always required more than just following ready-made scripts. It always required attentive eyes, an open heart, and the courage to recognize the divine presence even in the most unlikely places and moments. It is as if the story of Gethsemane, unearthed little by science, echoes within us a silent invitation. Look deeper. Question what has been taken for granted. Seek the essence, not just the appearance. This internal call resonates strongly with anyone willing to embark on this journey of discovery, where the greatest treasure is not finding the exact physical location, but rather accessing the spiritual truth that it represents. And to think that all of this has been hidden for so long only reinforces the idea that, in our own lives, there are truths, gifts, and purposes waiting to be revealed. But they only emerge when we have the courage to dig beneath the surface. Each new piece of evidence that emerges in this scenario is more than archaeological information. It is a living metaphor for the transformative power that awaits us when we truly give ourselves to our mission. Gethsemane teaches that the greatest impact does not come from what we show to the world, but from the secret decisions we make in the silence of the soul, often under pressure that only we know. Therefore, when you hear about Gethsemane again, perhaps now you will be able to see not only the garden but also the process, the invisible press that extracts the best from those who accept to go through the dark night of the soul in search of the light. Comment there. I want to go deeper if this journey of revelation also makes sense for you. When we talk about Gethsemane, we are not just dealing with traditions preserved over the centuries. We are talking about real evidence, silent proofs that, with each discovery, weave together the threads of history with a precision that impresses even the most skeptical scholars. One of the most fascinating finds in recent times was revealed through botanical analysis. In-depth studies of the olive trees in the current Garden of Gethsemane indicated that some of them are more than 900 years old. And the most intriguing thing is that these trees are not just old witnesses. Its roots, hidden underground, may be even older, perhaps even dating back to the period when Jesus walked on that sacred ground. These revelations change everything. They invite us to see Gethsemane not just as a point on the map or a symbolic memory, but as a living link that crosses the centuries and carries within it the memory of the most profound transformation that humanity has ever witnessed. Because when we think that the roots of these trees may have been nourished by the same earth that received the tears and blood of Jesus, something inside us awakens. The story stops being distant, cold, and academic, and starts to pulse in a lively, real, almost palpable way. Now I want to go even deeper into this subject. Analysis carried out in the laboratory using advanced radiocarbon dating methods has shown that although the visible trunks of the olive trees are only medieval, the underground roots may have survived the fires, invasions, and wars that devastated Jerusalem. It is as if, beneath the surface, a silent memory has resisted all the winds of history, waiting for the right moment to be brought to light. This discovery further reinforces the symbolism of Gethsemane, What really matters is not always what appears on the surface. It is what is hidden, what remains firm and silent, even when everything seems to be falling apart. A hidden truth that can only be accessed by those who are willing to look beyond appearances. It's not just the trees that tell this story. Ancient maps, forgotten documents in monastic libraries, and accounts from pilgrims from the first centuries also offer valuable clues. Many of these records speak of a Gethsemane surrounded by oil presses and caves, a bustling place where hard work and spirituality intertwined almost invisibly. Some manuscripts indicate the existence of a small underground sanctuary where early Christians took refuge to pray, seeking to replicate Jesus' experience in his night of agony. These behind-the-scenes stories show us that the faith of those first centuries was visceral, pulsating, charged with a real thirst for connection and transformation. They were not looking for a decorative faith, but a profound encounter, which involved suffering, courageous decision, and total surrender. And it is exactly this mindset that Gethsemane still invites us to cultivate today. By bringing together these fragments of evidence, the ancient roots, the forgotten texts, the archaeological remains, we begin to piece together a picture that is much richer and more impactful than that presented by traditional narratives alone. Each new piece of information brings us closer to a greater revelation, that Gethsemane is a spiritual portal for all those who wish to live not a comfortable faith, but a faith that transforms, that demands, that shapes character and destiny. And to think that all of this was hidden, buried under layers of superficial interpretations, traditions, and historical simplifications, is, to say the least, disturbing. Because if this is true of Gethsemane, how many other truths could be waiting to be rediscovered? How many other precious details of our spiritual heritage are there, at our fingertips, but hidden by haste, distraction, or an unwillingness to dig deeper? Today's Gethsemane, seen in light of these discoveries, is not a dead place, frozen in time. He is a living invitation, a call to those who have the courage to look at their own roots, to question their own beliefs, and to submit to the pressure necessary to extract the purest oil from their personal journey. It is impossible to go through these revelations without feeling the internal impact they generate. Gethsemane is not just about Jesus, it's about us, about what we are willing to face to fulfill what we are called to live, about the willingness to go through dark nights without guarantees, sustained only by the faith that, even when everything seems lost, something greater is being shaped within us. Each archaeological piece of evidence, each centuries-old root, each historical fragment, is like a seed planted in our mind and spirit. A seed that, if cultivated sincerely, can lead us to a transformation as profound as that which Christ himself experienced that night in the Garden of Agony. Comment there, "My roots are deep." If this message spoke to you, now I want to go even deeper into this subject, because there is a revelation that could turn everything upside down. And maybe you haven't heard of it yet. Behind everything that has already been said about Gethsemane, there is a theory that has been gaining more and more strength among archaeologists, historians, and scholars of the scriptures. A hypothesis that not only raises suspicions, but also calls into question the very place where millions of believers shed their tears, prayers, and hopes. What if I told you that the garden that is today visited by pilgrims from all over the world might not be the real Gethsemane? Yes, there is a real possibility, supported by geographic evidence, ancient documents, and little explored accounts, that the real place where Jesus faced his agony is hidden, literally buried, beneath modern buildings in Jerusalem. Like a truth hidden in plain sight, but buried beneath centuries of religiosity, urban expansion, and institutional interests. Some researchers point to first-century records that describe Gethsemane in details that do not match what is shown to the public today. Topographical references mention a wider extension, caves interconnected by natural passages, olive oil presses embedded in rocks, and even water channels that do not exist in the current garden. And the most intriguing thing is that one of these ancient descriptions fits perfectly into a piece of land that today is below a monastery. This possible hidden garden, as some are starting to call it, is located just a few meters from the traditional site. But what makes it so? Special is the concrete evidence found during structural renovations in religious buildings. During excavations carried out to reinforce the foundations of a convent, archaeologists came across a network of abandoned caves, remains of an olive oil press, and a rudimentary water drainage system. All of this exactly in the place that, according to ancient texts, would be a common stopping point for travelers and shepherds in Jesus' time. The impact of this discovery is profound because it forces us to reconsider everything we know, or think we know, about the spiritual geography of the New Testament. This is not about discrediting anyone's faith. On the contrary, it is about illuminating the shadows of tradition with the light of investigation. To give voice to evidence that has been silenced for centuries in the name of convenience or maintaining a comfortable narrative. And the most disconcerting thing about it all is that there is a real chance that Jesus prayed, sweated blood, and made his final decision for us in a place that is now forgotten, hidden under concrete, stone, and institutional silence. A place that has perhaps never been touched by pilgrims. A floor that, ironically, remained preserved precisely because it was ignored. This type of revelation brings us face to face with an uncomfortable question. Are we prepared to deal with the truth when it appears outside the place we always imagined? Because in this case, we are not talking about just any theory. We are talking about a documented possibility with archaeological traces, cartographic records, and physical evidence. The truth is that history, as we know it, was shaped by human decisions. By religious leaders, political interests and limits, of technical knowledge of each era. And sometimes, to keep faith alive, we prefer to cling to symbolism rather than face the consequences of an unexpected revelation. But true faith, that which transforms, does not fear the light of investigation. She is strengthened by the truth. Gethsemane, more than a fixed location, is the epicenter of one of the most intense decisions ever made by a human being, and knowing that it can be hidden in silence beneath our feet generates a feeling that is difficult to explain. It's as if we are stepping on a secret, as if the city of Jerusalem kept a dormant memory in its foundations, waiting for eyes willing to see it. And that changes everything, because it reveals that even what seems definitive can be questioned. That place is considered sacred may, in fact, just be symbols of something even deeper. And the search for authenticity has never been comfortable. It is, almost always, a path of friction, of restlessness, of courage. But there is also a beauty in this tension, because it shows us that faith is not tied to a geographic point. It moves, evolves, adapts. And when we discover that Gethsemane may have been somewhere else this whole time, we also discover that our own moments of decision, pain, and surrender don't have to happen in special places to be sacred. They become sacred precisely because we decide on them. The real Gethsemane may be buried, but the agony, the prayer, the sweat mixed with blood, these are alive. Because they are repeated in each one of us. Every time life puts us in front of a call greater than our strength, in front of a choice that demands everything, in front of a moment in which we can no longer escape. And maybe, just maybe, the Gethsemane that Jesus experienced that night was hidden not by chance, but so that we are all forced to look for it within ourselves. Right there. The truth always finds a way, if this touched you in any way. Now I want to go even deeper into this subject. Because what is at stake here is not just geography or archaeology. It is something that directly touches the basis of the faith of millions of people. If the theory is true, if the original Gethsemane really is hidden beneath modern buildings, the impact would not just be historical, but spiritual. Think about this for a moment. What if we have been venerating a symbolic site for centuries, while the true garden of Jesus' agony is buried, forgotten, out of sight. This changes everything. Because at the same time that it confronts traditions, it also offers us a unique opportunity to rethink what really is sacred. This is not about invalidating the faith built around the current place. On the contrary, it's about remembering that true faith has never been tied to a point on the map. She has always been linked to truth, transformation, delivery. And Gethsemane, as a symbol, lives on, but as real history it may be somewhere else. And this detail could forever change the way we connect with the most decisive episode in the life of Jesus, and this possibility brings inevitable discomfort, because it forces us to face how much we still depend on external structures to validate internal experiences. If the current garden is just a representation, will our faith crumble? Or does this free us to understand that the most important thing was never the place, but the decision made there? The urgency of this discovery lies in its power to provoke a repositioning, a new look. Because if the real Gethsemane is hidden, what else can it be? How many truths are still buried by history, and even more, how many are buried inside us? When Jesus said, "Thy will be done" in that garden, he was not in front of a crowd. He was alone, in the dark, faced with a choice that would change everything. This is the heart of Gethsemane, not the physical place, but the moment when obedience overcomes fear. And that remains what matters most. Perhaps knowing that the exact location may be hidden helps us remember that the most sacred moments do not need public recognition to be real. Gethsemane happens in silent decisions, in early morning prayers, in internal conflicts that only God knows about. If all of this is indeed true, and the evidence is strongly pointing in that direction, then we are facing a change in mindset. A call to depth, a clear reminder that living faith is that which resists changes, discoveries, and shocks of reality. And perhaps the lost Gethsemane is also a mirror, because many of us feel like this, displaced, erased, misunderstood. But even buried, the garden is still there, firm, marked, unforgettable, just like everything that is true. Comment there. Faith begins in silence, if this touched you in any way. Now I want to go even deeper into this subject. Because behind all these discoveries and possibilities, there is a question that remains alive. And you, deep down, what do you feel when you hear all this? Regardless of maps, dates, or ancient walls, there is something that resonates within us when we talk about Gethsemane. Maybe it's the weight of that decision. Maybe the loneliness of that moment. Or maybe the simple fact of realizing that something so great happened in such a human, so earthly space. We usually look for answers outside, in the ruins, in research, in the stones. But sometimes the strongest revelation happens in the silence of reflection. When we look at our own journey and realize how many times we have gone through a personal Gethsemane. How many times have we been faced with choices that required courage, faith, and renunciation? And that's when the real meaning starts to take shape. Therefore, this is the moment when your opinion matters. Not as just any comment, but as a living piece of this conversation. Because this type of content only makes sense if it provokes true reflection in you. If it made you think differently, remember something, feel something. Even if you don't have all the answers yet, share it with me. This space here is also yours. When you write, you not only record your vision, but you help build a community of seekers, of people who don't accept shallow answers, who are willing to go deeper. And this is rarer than it seems. In a world full of distractions and ready-made answers, finding people who want to walk behind the scenes of faith is precious. So don't just keep it to yourself. Write here what you believe about all this. Is the real Gethsemane still hidden? Or is the true place where faith manifests itself sincerely, regardless of the soil? If any part of this journey touched you, even if in silence, comment below. I'm on this journey too. If you've come this far, It's because something inside you also feels that this journey is worth it. And that's why this channel exists. To bring to light these hidden truths, these forgotten places, and these stories that help us see faith with more depth, more connection, and more meaning. So, if this content made sense to you, if it somehow touched you or made you think differently, subscribe to the channel so you continue to receive videos like this, with more discoveries, more historical context, more points of view that often don't appear in traditional versions of Scripture. Enjoy and comment below. This message was for me. It's just a sentence, but it's a way for me to know that you were with me until the end, that it really reached you. And if we connected with this content, leave a like too. It's a simple gesture, but it helps this type of message reach more people who, like you, are in this sincere search. There's a video here that complements everything we've said so far, so click and follow me there. The journey is still just beginning.